is entitled to their own facts. That's a whole different issue. So opinions are good. I have I've seen today that the school teachers of the academy school both sections walked out of a meeting with the chairman of the board, Mr. Roland Duncan, after he told them that he doesn't know when they would be paid their vacation allowance. And just so happened, I was speaking to the minister yesterday, Minister of Education, Mr. Smith, about just that case, and he said, well, as government, he's willing to talk about it and see if they could come up with a solution. He said under no conditions will government have the school closed. But he said, they need to get the figures and stuff from the school, see what is happening, and see if, extra subsidy would solve the case. But first, the move has to be made by the school to send in the information so they can take a decision on that. And I think that is a good approach. So I think things are looking up. I kind of wondered, and I asked the minister clearly, would we have another school closed, and how would it affect the overall school population? He said, no, the school, you don't think the school will close, they won't let it close. So it's the ball would be in the board's court now to send the necessary information. Another news reaching us is that has been on the net for a few days now. State Secretary Knops, who will be coming to the island today, so you could expect to see them blocking the streets and riding around with a bunch of foolishness. Anyway, State Secretary Knops has dispelled all the objections filed by the governments of the overseas countries, so Curacao, Aruba, and St. Martin, on the so-called dispute regulations. So we can accept now that the Parliament in the Netherlands, they would pass this draft law and then give us that excuse that you could come with amendments. So for me, for St. Martin, I think we should really reconsider why we go to these IPCOs. Because if you sit with the parliament which are the elected representative of the people, and you can't get your minister to honor agreements made or live up to these decisions that were taken in this IPCO setting where all the parliaments are represented, then it makes no sense to continue wasting the taxpayers' money to be going backwards and forwards with the people. And secondly, let's stop talking dispute regulation. Let's take a course where we can go, and since these people are attacking your very autonomy and your ability to do things in your country, then you have to make a decision. You're either in or out. You can't be both. So my thing on this is let's start putting some limitations and some other things on these IPCOs, and we could save the people money. We talk about how much things we could do with the money and how much roofs we can help. Well, if we save the money that we spend to go to these IPCOs that I've said before made no sense, then maybe we could help a few more people. These things can and should be done by teleconferencing. There's no need in this day and age to go on these joyrides, spend a lot of money, hotels, airlines, per diem and all that, to achieve nothing. We can say we have spoken what we could speak over the phone also, and achieve just what we have achieved so far, nothing.
Interesting. I don't know if that is totally possible, what you're saying. It can be tried, but the IPCO meetings seems to be very important for the constellation of the Netherlands and, of course, the Dutch counterparts. But however, I understand exactly where you're taking that. And like we said, we will be we have started the morning show early today, and Mr. Jones seems to be quite fired up. Anyway, the continuation Central Committee meeting of Parliament about the authorization national ordinance for the disposal of the UTS shares will be today. That's the House of Parliament will sit in a Central Committee meeting Today, June the 25th, 2019, the Central Committee meeting, which was adjourned on the 5th of June, will be reconvened today, Tuesday, at 10 o'clock in the General Assembly chambers of the House at the Wilhelmina Straat in Phillipsburg. The agenda point is let me see here, the initiative national ordinance granting the authorization for alienization of the shares belonging to the country of St. Martin in the share capital of the United Telecommunication Services Authorization National Services NV Authorization National Ordinance for the disposal of UTS shares. Parliamentary year 2018-2019, and the Central Committee meeting is the Central Committee meeting of Parliament about advice fulfillment of the position of the Chair General Audit, Chairman General Audit. Now, I don't know how we're going to really get so many in today. Today seems to be a very packed day, Mr. Jones, that goes into effect, knowing to the fact that you have a budget meeting, and then we continue with the Central Committee meeting scheduled for 1 o'clock in the General Assembly chamber of the House of Parliament, and with the agenda point, the advice fulfillment position, Chairman General Audit Chamber, and so, you know, the approval of the composition, delegation, and provisions for members of Parliament to participate in Flag Day celebration in Curacao. So there's a full roster here for the parliamentarians.
Well, look, there's a full roster. That's what they're paid to do. It's pretty good. I think for today, the budget meeting is going to be it. It is important that we finalize. That we finalize the law on the sale of the UTS shares. So it's going to be, but sometime Parliament has got to work. I mean, they're well remunerated for what they do, so they can't bother about having busy days.
I know, but let's hope that they don't feel a little bit overstretched in this instance and find themselves, saying, well, no, we're going to bypass this meeting and let's stick with the budget.
Well,
so
this came up in the budget yesterday. If everybody did their work, we wouldn't be in this backlog. These things, when a proposal draft law comes up and the minister goes with it and supposed to come back to Parliament, why does it take so long? This is what causes the delay and the backlogs. This thing was discussed. It was an urgent matter when it was discussed because we have 12.5% in UTS. Curacao, the major shareholder, already sold their shares, and we had to come up with a legal structure what we're going to do with ours. It shouldn't take so long to come back to Parliament, so now you have to handle it because it is one of the things that is going to be taken up in the budget, so you should have handled it before. So that we have backlog, you have to do more work as of your own doing, so you can't bawl about it after the fact.
Okay, so you're talking about the parliamentarians themselves.
Yes. And the ministers. The minister have to come back with a draft law. So, that's what's going to be handled now, because the proposal came from Parliament, from Mr. Bryson. But if you understand how the system is, the parliamentarians could come up with draft laws, but they have to be defended by the minister. The minister have to come back to Parliament to defend the laws. And any changes they want to it. That's why they're in Central Committee. So to have to come back now and see how far it is and if they need amendments or alterations to it before it's handled in plenary.
I know you're just about ready for us to put on that take of the Parliament discussion yesterday. But and you also mentioned that you were quite happy to know and to see that there's a big change coming over the parliamentarians. But I must remind you, though, that there was only two. There was only two individuals that spoke, two members of Parliament that spoke. So,
but a lot more will speak today.
It's yet to see whether that particular corner has been passed or not.
But I think Well, what you get in these situations is this. If one person goes all out, does his homework, does his research, and presents, makes a decent presentation, it puts pressure on the others to do the same, because you can't be there sitting and have nothing to say in a budget meeting, which happened a lot of times before with people we elected in parliament. They sat through budget meeting after budget meeting and didn't contribute anything. Now, because of the new young blood, as I like to call it, is pushing and is doing research, they're getting the information from all corners of the world. And they're making comparative politics and what happens and how it should happen. It forces the other colleagues to also do their homework, and which is good for the country, that we're able to look at things and get different perspective, and that the 17 square miles we're on is not the whole world.
Yeah, I can imagine the pitch is good for playing, but the comparative politics, bedroom politics seems to be taking a back seat at the present moment, but I'm yet to see them get out of that pitch and do what they have to do, or what they should be doing, or what they want to do. That's when every man has spoken, because we have been in that hurdle where two came out and do something that the public expect them to do, and when you look, everything collapses after that.
I don't know if it will collapse, but what I'm seeing is this: the Parliament has a duty. I commend Messalina, Member of Parliament Messalina, on the way he handled the budget. He took the budget and every line item, he wrote down what he think was the shortcomings, what he think was bottlenecks, and things that needed more elucidation. So he did it point for point, so you could have a good overview of the entire budget. He was the first speaker from Parliament after the ministers presented. Then you had Mr. Bryson. Mr. Bryson's approach was, the things that government complain about, why the budget is late, not taking any responsibility on their own for presenting it late and having it delayed again and again, and certain things that government has, certain money, certain funds that the government has budgeted or talked about in the Central Committee does not show up in the budget. Those are things that we let pass us by before. The budget is a law. The ordinance and budget is a law. Once you pass it, the ministers can do what they want. So you have to be, that's why you want these debates, to go through it line item per line item, make sure it's right, so when you approve it, you don't have to be going back to the ministers to see what they're doing. And I think that is a good approach. And I expect of the 15 members, I think you had the first two. I think today, 2 o'clock, some of the others will get a chance to speak. I don't know how many, because each speaker have 90 minutes. Not all use their 90 minutes, but you can understand 90 minutes with 15, now 13 speakers is quite a part of the day.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that you are ready for us to put our first person on, and that's going to be Mr. Messalina. But like you said, not all will use the full 90 minutes, and that's left to be seen now whether they would use even 25 minutes of that in order to get it over with.
Well, you don't have to be a man of many words to bring your point across. Some people are good with words, and they could, with less time, they could say the same thing. So it depends on people's approach and the way they explain things. You don't need to have a teacher-student attitude to get your word across. People are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, so you can present the budget and people would understand.
So are we ready?
Okay, let's hear Member of Parliament Messalina's address, or part of it, because it's pretty long.
Honorable President of Parliament, Secretary General, members of Parliament, ministers and support staff, the public in the Tribune, those following on social media, and of course the people of St. Maarten, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the government of St. Maarten for presenting the budget 2019. I realize that many hours and effort went into the preparation of this budget. Once more to everyone that contributed to this budget, many, many thanks. I would like to make use of this opportunity to elucidate my vision on and clarify my interpretation of this budget 2019 and give some remarks and statements on this budget of this country and ultimately pose a few questions. First of all, we have to realize that the budget 2019 of country St. Maarten has a shortage of, to my opinion, 67.2 million Antillian guilders. To keep it simple for the people of St. Maarten, the budget is actually just the expenses, what they call in Dutch the lasten, the revenues, the baten as they say in Dutch, the capital investment is what is the country going to plan to invest in the country, and the outstanding loans and debts. I would like to start specifically putting attention to the expenses of this country. The total expenses of country St. Maarten amounts to a figure of 483 million guilders. These are the expenses of our country. The personnel expenses of civil service are the highest costs of the country, approximately 183 million. This is 37.8% of the total cost of country St. Maarten. But if we add the free insurance OZR BZV that the civil servants are benefiting from, if we add the pension contribution and the VAT, if we add the accommodation costs being rent of buildings and the utility expenses of government and training and educational programs for the civil servants, the total cost related to the civil service will reach approximately 51.2% of the expenses of the country. That means that for every $1 that we give out in this country, 51.2 cent dollar is being given to the civil service of this country. To my opinion, a percentage of 51.2 of the total budget of this country, for me, looks a little high. On the other hand, we have to realize that we are not a rich social state, as the Dutch says, the sociale verzorgingsstaat. We are not one of them. So we do not have the money and the richness of, for example, the Netherlands, which has a very secure social system. So on the one hand, the expenses of the civil service is high, but on the other hand, we do not have a social system to give some guarantee of security to have a stable socio-economic status in this country. Other notable figures contributing to the expenses of the country that I would like to focus on is, for example, the BZV contribution. The BZV contribution increased from 22.7 million in 2018 to 24.5 million in 2019, being an absolute increase of 1.8 million. I would like the Minister of ESA to take specific note of this increase in 1 year and ask himself how he thinks to keep up with this trend in his ambitious future national health insurance. I would also like to pay some attention to the sub-item in the expenses called the rechtsadvies. The expenses for rechtsadvies has increased with 3.7 million. In 2018, we spent 5 million for rechtsadvies, and now we are spending for this year, in 2019, we have it budget for 8.7 million. Personally, I'm asking myself if this is really a realistic approach considering the financial status of this country. Legal advices, to my concern, can and must never take a higher portion of the pie cost the budget than, for example, roofing projects, social housing, old age pension, and onderstandsuitkeringen. I would also like to pay attention to de subitem onderstandsuitkeringen en pensioenen. This went from 9.9 million in 2018 to 7.7 million in 2019. This is 2.2 million less. This is very strange, especially for a post-Irma phase with more unemployment and an increase of poverty. So instead of having a higher budget for onderstandsuitkeringen en pensioenen, we're having now a less budget while the country is in a very, very difficult post-Irma phase. I have difficulty to live with the fact and idea that we are giving out more money to legal advices than that we are increasing the quality of life of the people of St. Maarten. I repeat, legal advices 8.7 million in 2019, onderstandsuitkeringen en pensioenen 7.7 million. I would also like to pay some attention to the budget of the Ministry of Justice concerning the expense of 4.6 million being ondersteuning Koninklijke Politie St. Maarten for the Dutch personnel that we are working with. The Kingdom government is financing the TBO and the Kingdom government is financing the RST, but not the Dutch assistance in the local national section of the police force. Minister of Justice, you have to explain me why the Kingdom government is adhering to different agendas when it comes to technical assistance for the law enforcement of this country. Concerning now the hot item, salary of parliamentarians. Minister of Finance, I have no problem with contributing in a deduction of 10% for the salary, believe me. But I have a problem that it is proposed by Mr. Knops and Mr. Van Raak. By bypassing the laws and randverordeningen of this country. Actually, that is what they're doing in my autonomous country. For clarity's sake, you have to realize that the whole salary scale is regulated by a landsverordening, and this means that this will have consequences for all civil servants of this country. I will give you a scary example. If in Parliament building, the lady that is helping us to keep this place clean is owing more salary than the lady that works in the Tweede Kamer, we may expect an instruction from Mr. Knops instructing us to deduct the salary from the lady keeping our Parliament building clean. So we better be careful with those individual instructions. Minister, you know better than me. The change of salaries has to go through amended draft law that has to pass the trajectory of the Council of Advice and Parliament. The following now is concerning the revenues of the country. The highest income revenue for the country are the payroll tax, the loonbelasting, and the TOT, the turnover tax. The two together will contribute 267 million for the year 2019. These two revenues consolidate 65% of the total income of the country for 2019. But mind you, to make a good comparison, what we're actually now not doing, for us to make a good comparison of the revenues of the country, it is necessary to compare the budgeted revenues of 2019, not with the Irma budget of 2018, but we have to do that to justify where we are heading to with this budget, with the budgeted revenue from 2017. We should not compare the budget of 2019 with the budget of 2018, because this is just a chaotic post-Irma budget, so we will have to give reference to the budget of 2017 for us to know where we are heading with the budget of 2019. If you compare the budgeted revenues of 2019 with those of 2017, the following stands out. The income through the loan belasting, being the payroll tax, is calculated to be 5 million higher. So we think that we are going to get 5 million more out of loan belasting in 2019 compared to the one in 2017. This is strange because it's impossible that more people will be employed in 2019 compared to 2017 due to the fact that not all hotels and companies are open as before Hurricane Irma. So, Minister, I think this is the first calculation mistake that you are making when you are counting on the estimated revenue for country St. Maarten. The following is concerning the TOT. The government expects more revenues due to the economic recovery post-Irma and due to the start of huge projects out of the MRRP. So for me, it's not understandable that the TOT of 2019 will be less than the TOT of 2017, being 138 million in 2017 compared to 119 in 2019. With a higher economic activity, you would expect the TOT to increase and not to decrease with 19 million. I think this is the second mistake in the calculation of the revenues of the country for 2019. What strikes me too is the much lower logeerbelastingen and timeshare fee, from 4.2 million in 2018, being a post-Irma phase, to only 2.5 million in 2019, coming from 11.7 million in 2017. This is strange. More hotels are going to open in 2019 compared to 2018, and we are calculating less income from the logeerbelastingen compared to 2018. My question is then, Minister, can you explain me this negative trend in the logeerbelastingen? Because I believe that the logeerbelastingen and timeshare fee has to show a positive growth trend instead of a negative trend if you compare 2018 with 2019. The following is concerning the kapitaaldienst, being the capital investments. These are the investments that government is planning to do. Mind you, the approval of the CFT is explicitly necessary as it is structured now. I think this is keeping the country hostage, and I believe that out of my heart that this CFT control of our budget is keeping my country hostage. First of all, the government is also not substantiating in the kapitaaldienst the investment figures. In my opinion and vision, St. Maarten needs to make a few huge investments that, to my surprise, are not included in the kapitaaldienst of the country. As for example, the housing and social housing, I do not see a separate budget for this, neither for the construction of a new prison, and neither the plan of action to tackle fundamentally the monster called the dump. The government is further securing 32 million in its kapitaaldienst for tax reform. This is 34% of the total amount to be invested in the country. Minister, we are talking about a community of only 50,000 people. Do you really need 32 million to get the tax act of this country efficient and effective? St. Maarten has only a population estimated to be 50,000, in which perhaps 30,000 are entitled to pay tax. I cannot imagine that you need 32,000 to shake up a community of 50,000 people to pay their tax. If you budget 15 million, for example, for the tax reform, you will still have a remaining 15 million over to do some structural repair and restore to the destroyed sport complexes, and secondly, to really start to execute a plan to fundamentally resolve our monster called the dump, and thirdly, start with the development of social housing. Minister lose from the monies budgeted in the trust fund, I'm negatively impressed with the fact that government did not reserve any significant amount in his kapitaaldienst to structurally resolve the dump issue of this country. The investments that country St. Maarten has to realize in the NRRP, by the way, are financially very high. But these investments, as the Prime Minister mentioned in her introduction, are not processed in the budget of 2019. And now the following. Considering the fact that healthcare is my baby, I would like to make some remarks and statements on this topic. The healthcare costs and medical expenses are extremely high in this country. It is of extreme importance to start making arrangements in the budget to cover these costs or to do investments in a responsible way to manage a responsible healthcare. Page 17 of the elucidation draft budget is not talking anymore about a national health insurance, a universal health insurance, or a general health insurance, but now of a universal health coverage being the new brand name UHC. Minister of VSA, this is one of the last times I think I'm going to make some statements about the universal health insurance or general health insurance because I made it in the past already. I'm going to say something today and I'm going to repeat it. The introduction of this NHI will become the nightmare of this country, and I will tell you why, Minister. You have to adhere to 10 points to introduce a national health insurance in this country. And the requirements for a healthy national health insurance are the following. 1, the country applying for an NHI has to be a rich country. St. Maarten is not a rich country. 2, the country has to be well organized. I leave that one for all of us. 3, the country has to have a low percentage of illegals. 4, the country must have a very low rate of undocumented people in the community. 5, the country must not be geographically localized in a hurricane belt. 6, the country should not be vulnerable for the influx of political or economic refugees, as is the case now with the Venezolanos. 7, the country should have a secured, well-organized border control. I do not know if we have that because I see more and more Venezolanos on the street. 8, the country should have a large population, as St. Maarten has a very small population. 9, the country should have a low poverty rate. I think that is not the case for St. Maarten. And the country should be part of a continent and not of an island. St. Maarten as a country does not adhere to any of the above-mentioned 10 conditions. For a health-care financial system in St. Maarten to be successful, we do not need, Minister, an NHI, but only some slight adjustments to the current system we have. Firstly, if we want to talk about a solidarity principle in our healthcare, the OZR arrangement has to be solved. The civil servant has to start contributing financially towards his healthcare insurance. Secondly, we need to stop manipulating and fooling the system by creating the impression that by raising the tariffs, we will have a sustainable, balanced financial healthcare system. I repeat, it's not about the tariffs that makes the financing of healthcare sustainable, but the premiums. Just now in your introduction, Minister, you were talking now about contemplating to increase the ambulance tariffs. And I'm thinking immediately, but who is going to pay now the premiums to pay for the ambulance tariffs? And the whole day we are talking about tariffs, but we forget that somebody has to pay the premiums for the premiums to pay the tariffs. So unfortunately, nobody is talking about an increase of the premiums. And thirdly, and this is a very important one for everybody here. There is also a suspicious, systematic linking of a NHI as a condition to realize the construction of a new hospital. I know, of course, where this is coming, that every time that the word hospital falls, it is followed by an NHI. Minister, I can tell you, this was born with de vierde punt van de financiële aanwijzing from the Kingdom Council of Ministers from 2015 concerning instructions to reform the ouderdomsstelsel and the ziektekostenstelsel, and that is where this NHI was born. This NHI is a typical example of the Dutch saying, doel heiligt middel, meaning purpose justifies means. Although an improvement of the basic healthcare with a new hospital establishment, the demand for super specialistic care will continue to increase with a remaining high percentage of abroad costly referrals. The question remains now, Minister, who is now trying to please who with the introduction of an NHI? Every time again this hospital falls, this NHI follows, and at a certain moment I was asking myself, who is now trying to please who with this NHI? Is it the CFT that is imposing an NHI on the Minister of VSA to create a virtual financial context to realize the construction of a new hospital? That's possible. Secondly, or is the obsession for a new hospital imposing a doomed-to-fail national health insurance on the people of St. Maarten? Or is the introduction of an NHI the illusional solution for a bankrupt financial healthcare system? Instead of resolving the issues that has contributed to the bankruptcy of the healthcare of the country, we are now going to replace the current financial system with a new illusional one called the universal health care. Minister of Health, I really want you to put attention to the following statement. It's very sensitive, but I dare to say it. Any health care insurance system for a country, if it's called a SZV or a NHI or a UHC, is doomed to fail if there is a too direct, influential government controlling indirectly with political agendas the insurance institution like a SZV or a NHI. Politicians or ministers through government should never use the insurance funds to finance projects that are important to the government, like, for example, the construction of a national hospital, or, for example, the acquisition of a government building that took place in the past.
Listening to Member of Parliament, Dr. Messalina, and he was going through the budget and seeing the monies that are budgeted for 2019 as compared to 2017, which was before the hurricane, the last budget we had that we were able to compare the figures. He believes that you cannot compare it to 2018 because 2018 budget was basically a beggar's budget with less economic activity in the country. He pointed out a very alarming trend. The cost of civil service in St. Maarten is much too high. If I can remember well from my days at the airport, we were advised to keep the staff salaries to 33% or below. He has pointed out that the salaries and the other things for civil servants is now at 37.8%. And if you add the housing, so the rental of places, the contributions for pension, the VAT, and so, it would mean that 51.2% is paid for civil service in St. Maarten, which is definitely too high. It is a mechanism for bankruptcy. Government is overladen with civil service. Besides that, the same government has a lot of consultants employed. So if you have to have all these consultants with such a heavy load of civil servant, it would mean that somebody isn't doing their job. And if they're not doing the job, why is the taxpayer burdened with maintaining it? So that is important. Also, government is pointed out that most of the money for government is coming from the not profit tax, I'm sorry, the salary taxes. So taxes on your salaries, the so-called income belasting. It is about 65% from TOT, and in the payroll tax is 65%. So it means that all the other taxes and stuff like that are much less that we're collecting and expecting to do the same job. He said over the period in 2000 compared to 2017, we are expecting then by budget to make 5 million more, and he doesn't understand how we have less activity, less people employed because of the major hotel properties being down, and we get more money on payroll taxes. So where would it be coming from? He said as comparing 2019 to 2018, in 2019 we expect to make 119 million in turnover tax, while in 2018 we made 138 million. So we have a drop of 19 million. How do you explain that with more activity in the construction and so going on? More people are working. So how in the world are we going to make 19 million less? He also pointed out that the hotel fees, hotel taxes has been, in 2017, it was 11.7 million, but now is budgeted for 2019 at 2.5 million. So why all of the differences that it went that low? So hotel and timeshare, the so-called hotel fees and timeshare fees are down almost 10 million for this budget. The Member of Parliament has an issue with the capital investment, that certain things are not taken up in there, and the things that are taken up, he believes, could have been done more gradually, so less fund, permitting you to have more money to do other things. Like, for instance, housing and social housing, the prison, which remains a problem, we're still in court on the prison, and also the dump that we're doing nothing about is even not, no monies has been set in the budget to deal with the phenomenon called the dump. The Member of Parliament also pointed out that he has a problem with 32 million being set aside for tax reform. He believes that those things could have been done more piecemeal, so over a longer period of time, affording the country chance to help people with the roofing and damaged homes. And then to what he called his baby, because he's from the medical world, he said the implementation of the universal health insurance or the national health insurance, whatever you want to call it, has certain conditions. And one of them is, first of all, the country must be rich. And we know where St. Martin is on that one. He left it up in the air with the second point, where the country must be well organized. He said that's for us ourselves to determine if we're well organized. They must have a low percentage of illegals. That too, you can determine if we meet that condition. He also said that the country, the fourth point, the country must have a low and zero undocumented people. We know what's officially the population of St. Martin and what is the estimated population with the amount of undocumented that we can't really determine right now. Also, we should not be in a hurricane belt. That's a part of it that we can do nothing about. That's where we are. They must not be vulnerable to refugees, as we see now coming from Venezuela. You must have a proper border control. You remember we ceded border control to the Dutch. They must have a large population, which some modern population don't really fall under that. And the 10th one, we must be able to enforce the laws of the land. So it was critiquing on what was done and what should be done, but I think it is the way that we need to start in the future, checking our budget and checking the things that we say we're going to do or want to do and how we're going to pay for them. It's important not only to put figures there, but the income must be realizable. You cannot put you're going to collect from a business that is folded a certain amount of millions to service the budget. And that is what is happening in this thing. Okay, radio listeners, TV viewers, we have a guest in the house. We're going to take a break and go over to our guest, and then we'll be back to you with the budget after that. Your name? Your name? Okay, we have in the house Mr. Joseph Isaac from the St. Martin Weather Services. And of course, we want to talk about what's happening in the weather, what the prognosis is for the hurricane season, and other advice he might want to give you, and also help you prepare for the high hurricane season. So good morning to you, Mr. Joseph. And first of all, just to get it started, what are the predictions for hurricanes this year? How many are predicted?
Good morning to you. Good morning to all your listeners in Radio Lands via the internet and the many different forums. It's always a pleasure to be talking with the different radio stations and so on, because we at the Meteorological Service, we recognize the important role the media plays in getting the information out to the public. And without you, our work is very limited, because we can have the information, but if we cannot get it down to the man on the street for decision making, then we're not anywhere. So we want to thank you and the other media houses for giving us the opportunity to pass on information, as information is very critical in decision making. As you said, that every year we know we live in a hurricane belt, and every year for 6 months in the year we have what we call the hurricane season. If we were to do a very quick calculation, that's something we never really look at, is if we say 6 months in every year we are in the hurricane season, then it means that half of our life we're living in the hurricane season.
Yep.
So as a result of that, it should be really routine for us, and we should be really prepared for that sort of things. Our building patterns and everything else should be around that. But from time to time we drop the ball, and sometimes we forget that we are in the hurricane belt. You asked the question what the forecast is for this season, the 2019 season. Generally from the institutions, a number of institutions do forecast for the hurricane season, but the institutions we would pay more attention to based on their credibility and how they have performed over the years. That would be a combination of the University of Colorado, the Weather Channel, and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, that's NOAA. There's a lot of consistency in basically in their forecast for this year, where they basically projecting an average to slightly above average hurricane season. A lot of times people relax and find comfort in the averages and in the forecast for hurricane season, but there's really not much in a forecast for hurricane season in terms of preparedness. For example, we have had a number of quiet seasons where countries would have been impacted, and that would have been an active season for them as a country. Yeah. And then you would have had other seasons where it was extremely active, like 2005 was an extremely active season, but most of the islands in the Caribbean were spared. So then it would have been, per country, a very quiet season for the country. In terms of the forecast and so on, weeks, months before and so on, the forecast really doesn't tell you much as to when you're going to get the system, when it's going to affect, and who it's going to affect. So the forecasts are really based on certain parameters that these institutions look at and so on. But then coming down to it, it is all of us business as we go about our daily routines during the hurricane season to seek information, know where the information is, and establish in our own plans. And that is very critical. If you're not prepared, then you're going to panic. Sometimes even when you're prepared, you're going to panic. So you can imagine if you're not prepared for an event, you will panic more. And a lot of times to really make critical decisions and informed decisions, you have to be relaxed and you have to know where things are. It's like a routine. If you practice something every day, then you get into the mode of doing it, and then you know exactly what to do. But someone else come in and do the same thing, have to set their mind and remember, okay, I must move this now and I must move X next. But for you doing it all the time, your body will just acclimatize to it. So preparation is very critical. And in the preparation process, knowing your environment is one of the things that we need. If I'm going to get a lot of rainfall, what is my vulnerability? Am I living in an area where it is prone to flooding? You must know those things based on your historical information. Someone don't have to tell you that if they say flash flood warning or watch out, or you're going to get a hurricane with 2 inches of rainfall, 3 inches of rainfall. Based on past information, and so you would know that you would need to get out of the area. If you're living close to the sea, for example, and you hear a strong Category 5 hurricane, then you know sea surge going to affect you. So those little bits and pieces that we put together will inform us and know exactly what we have to do. One of the things we also have to remember is that each system is unique in its characteristics, and it doesn't mean that because you survive a Category 3 hurricane in X structure that you may survive a Category 2 in the same structure. There are a lot of dynamics that are changed within a system when a system moves. So for example, we have gusty winds. It could be that none of the gust winds affected that building. It could also be that the direction of the wind in X system and the direction of the wind in Y system would be different. So how it approach the structure is different, and maybe where the structure might be vulnerable, the stronger system didn't affect it there. So there are a lot of different parameters and dynamics we have to put together in the preparation process.
One of the things that is thrown around here loosely, referring back to 2017, Irma and Maria, it is still, when you listen to government itself talking about, yeah, we were ill prepared or we weren't prepared. People are basically, beasts of habit. You do certain things a certain way all of your life or most of your life. We have seen Category 5s before. The latest one was 1995. And people, based on that experience, thought that, okay, it's a Category 5. In the same areas of the world like you referred to now, they decided to write it out, but it didn't work out that way. So with the super strong storms that we see now, if we take example of Irma and Maria, what it did in Puerto Rico, and so besides the regular things you do, have water, have all the things you're advised to do, what other preparations would you suggest?
The preparations for the superstorms, Category 5 and so on, would be, my thing is we have to be able to identify structures that could be used as shelters. We know for Irma that there were a couple shelters opened, and the government opened a couple shelters in 2017 for Irma. There are certain homes that you can be able to assess and know that they would be able to go through it, proper concrete roof, proper shutters, etc., etc. I don't think you should leave it for chance. Once you have a doubt about the capacity of your structure as to whether it could survive a Category 5 or not, you should take all necessary precautions and move out of the building and go to a safe area. It is much better for you to leave your home, because you're not sure if it could survive a Category 5 hurricane, and go to a shelter or go to a friend's structure that is very strong. And after the system, you go to your home and your home is intact. There's nothing wrong in that. You do not want to find yourself there. First thing is going to put a lot of stress on you, because if, for example, you're in your home and then 1 or 2 sheets of galvanized start to move and you're not sure how strong your structure is, it puts a lot of stress and a lot of panic on you. So you're better off, if you're not sure what your house can manage, get to a safe area, and after the system, you go back home.
The other thing that we were having a problem with is, as you said, information. There were some stations that were knocked out, but those that were available were still willing or giving the best information. I heard you 1,000 times through the night and stuff like that. What information or what advice will you give people, and then staying tuned in and staying where you are? Because a lot of people were talking the day after how they ran out of the house and they ran here. Is that a good idea?
It is. There are 2 things to it, because even at our office we had to move because our life was threatened. However, because we were monitoring the system, we knew, we had a fair idea of how long the eye was going to be, because we had a very good picture as to the direction the storm was taken. So I could inform the staff and we could make a decision that, listen, this is the eye, we have about 30 or 40 minutes before the winds increase again. So we could move from our building because our roof was compromised.
Okay.
So at that time we were in the Turtle Pier building.
Okay.
And we decided to move to the airport. When we moved to the airport, but you'd understand that would be on foot. We were not driving because we couldn't drive. When we got to the airport, we realized that the terminal building was compromised. We couldn't stay there either. So we went down into Mao area, and we were in the basement, a car park area, and we were pretty safe there until we went up to the hotels, in the corridor of the hotels. But I'm saying that, and that is why when we give in hurricane information, and I can clearly remember in 2017 when we were given the information, there are a couple times on the radio station I would say, we're not sure how long we can be on for again, because there's a possibility of you losing communication. So we would always try and give the public a picture of what to expect. You're going to get strong winds for the next 6 hours. For 3.5 hours, after that you're going to feel a lull. Do not think it's the end of the system. So we give that type of information. And I remember even when dealing with Irma, I was given a little bit of information about Jose that was right behind Irma. And I remember once someone from a radio station asked me, but we're dealing with Irma, why are you talking about Jose? And I say, yeah, but you have to understand that most likely what Irma is going to do to us is that we're not going to have that sort of communication to give any information about any other system. So we have to warn persons that there's a possibility of another impact after Irma, a couple of days after. And that is how you must manage the information. Yes, persons may say you want to give persons too much at a time, but reality is reality. We cannot take ourselves away from where we are. We love the beach, we love the sun, we love the warm weather and so on. And that is all what it is. Anywhere you go in the world, you're going to have a natural phenomena to deal with. So again, yes, we would try, and we would try as much as possible to stay on as long as possible. In terms of giving information, all radio stations, the government would have their own briefing times and so on. We are active part of that, and we continue to do that. The challenges now would be the challenges on social media. Some people are very good on social media and they can give you graphics and so on. You think it's from the National Hurricane Center. But we have a structure, and we have a very good structure in the region that is praised as one of the best structures in the world. We are part of the World Meteorological Organization. We are members of the World Meteorological Organization. We share membership with Curacao, but apart from that, our office is fully independent from the Curacao Met Service. And in our region, we have the National Hurricane Center. The National Hurricane Center is in Miami, and they're the ones responsible for dealing with any tropical cyclones and so on. The reason for that, they have the equipment, they have the huge computers, they can run the models and so on, and they have the aircrafts that can go out there, hurricane hunters and so on. They have the expertise and everything else, but we work together with them very closely. So when you hear there's a hurricane watch or warning out for St. Martin, the National Hurricane Center, they are not the ones issuing it for St. Martin. It's the Meteorological Department of St. Martin doing it for St. Martin. So we have that sort of independence. And when the National Hurricane Center would put all the advisories, at the end of the advisory, you always have a statement saying, for local impacts, whatever, consult your National Weather Service. So the National Weather Service has a responsibility. So when you hear there's a watch or warning out, the government of St. Martin has issued, it means the Met Service acting on behalf of the government has issued that, and not the National Hurricane Center. But we work very closely with the National Hurricane Center. So for example, if Irma approaching the island and so on, we would either get a call from the National Hurricane Center or we would call them and we'd say, well, based on what we're seeing, we think it is time, with their expertise, what they're seeing and so on, we'd have a discussion and we'll make a decision. It is very difficult, and before you ask, in terms of the coordination, we have to get the coordination done properly because we're not responsible for Saint-Martin.
Okay.
Meet your friends.
Yeah, I know.
Responsible for Saint-Martin, but then you can understand there's basically no weather phenomena that's going to affect us and not affect Saint-Martin. Then you have Saba and Statia, the Netherlands Met Service, responsible for Saba and Statia. Then just across you have Anguilla. The Met Service of Antigua is responsible for Anguilla. So you can see just in one small area, you have all these different entities having responsibilities for issuing watches and warnings for small areas that are so close to each other. So what we have arranged and so on, and we have meetings every year and we discuss those things and so on. So we try to have some discussion before we go to the National Hurricane Center. So among ourselves we say, yes, we think it is time. Let us say for all the islands in the region, let us put in a watch or warning. It may not always work because sometimes you have technical issues, and when I say technical issues, in terms of state sovereignty. So for example, the French side would use a color code. Their color code might mean certain things that once you have this color code, there's no schools X, Y, and Z and so on. So they may decide that they may want to keep schools open for a longer period, so they're not going in for a watch yet. But as much as possible, we try to avoid that sort of complication and try and do it together.
Okay, for the layman, what are we supposed to understand by watch and warning? We hear a lot, there's a hurricane watch, there's a hurricane warning. To the man in the street, all of it says the same thing. So how do you explain the difference of a watch and a warning?
It has to do with, let's say, probabilities, and a watch, we can now get a watch up to about 48 hours before. So when a watch is issued, basically what it says is that within 48 hours, you could expect the impacts. A warning generally comes after a watch, which is now 24 to 36 hours that you could get impact. There are some subtle things about them, however, is that you could find yourself getting a warning and not get a watch. A perfect example would be the scenario of Gonzalo. Because Gonzalo formed so close to the island and it was expected to affect the island in about 24 hours. There was no time for a watch, so we went straight into a warning. So you have those scenarios. So you do not always have the scenario where you get a watch before a warning. If the data and information is not available and something just spring up and we don't have enough time in terms of the 48 hours, then you can go straight into a warning. Sometimes what gets persons confused also is that we could be dealing with a tropical storm but issue a hurricane warning or hurricane watch. but we're dealing with a tropical storm. So that sometimes confuses persons. But all it means is, while at the time we're dealing with a tropical storm, we're saying that on impact, or when it will affect the island, it will then be a hurricane. So these are the sort of things that persons need to know. More and more we try to emphasize a little bit more on impact forecasting. Impact forecasting is basically, instead of saying 3 inches of rainfall, we try and say X area is expected to be flooded and so on. That is very scientific based. You need a lot of data and so for that. We try to interpret things as much as possible. It will take some time before we can fully get into that area of impact forecasting. But generally, globally, that's where the science is moving, into impact forecasting. But you'd appreciate a lot of data and so on. You need to know what your buffer metric is like, so that you know your run-up in terms of storm surge and so on. You need to know how flat your areas are to say that this place is going to flood with 2 inches of rain and so on. But that is the general direction that the science is taking. But like I said before, that because of historical knowledge and everything else, you have to know your environment and how to respond to information. And what you said is so correct. What does that mean? And these are the kind of things that people have to ask themselves. When I hear X on a radio station, what does that mean? You're going to get a lot of information out there. You're going to get a lot of wrong information. You're going to get information that is correct, but may not come from an official source. And we always advise persons to stick to official sources. People can do some very nice graphics. The graphics might be better than ours, but the information may not be correct.
May not be correct. Yeah?
I also would want to another message I would want to give is that people should try and verify information before sharing. A lot of times we get things on our WhatsApp, Facebook, and so on, and as we get it, the first thing we do is the share button, even before trying to verify the information. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years back, the Met Service in Antigua issued a warning around the Easter weekend, having to informing persons that they basically should not go to this sea. We didn't issue that. However, the message that came out said the Met Office, but it didn't say the Met Office of Antigua. And that message was going all over. It came here, and it was all over. The Met Office was saying, do not go to the beach. And then we had to do some amount of damage control because that was not our message. You know, so persons can help by knowing that, okay, getting this information, where is the source should I go to verify it? Let me verify it before I send it out. Because we know what it is like. When you send something on your WhatsApp or your Facebook, even if you get the correct information after, if you send it to 10 persons, you're not going to send a message again to the 10 persons who told them that it was not correct. And even if you do that, these 10 persons will already send it to another 15 persons each, and they're not going to do it. So when it's gone, it's gone. So especially critical information in terms of so that persons have to make certain decisions, and so we have to be careful as to what information we forward and make sure that the information is authentic and is coming from the right source. The other general guiding principle, which is a little bit on the disaster management side, is during the hurricane season, how you avoid yourself from getting bogged down into the traffic, and so if something just pops up late. So you know you're in the hurricane season, you know you have to live in the hurricane season. What is your shopping pattern? How do I shop that if something pops up that that's not the time I'm going to look for dry foods? So I already have X, Y, and Z set up. If I have the capacity to store fuel or whatever I need to store, I store it before anything shows up, so I'm not in the rush. And that way we can make things a lot easier for ourselves. And sometimes people tell you it's an issue of economics and money and so on. But if you're going to buy biscuits, come towards the end of the hurricane season, you don't need it anymore, you're not going to throw it, you're going to eat it. If you understand what I'm saying. If you buy 1 or 2 canned stuff and so on. So you're not really wasting anything. So it's just a matter of making smart and wise decisions.
Yeah.
knowing where to get the information from, and we just know that we cannot move from where we are. We love where we are. We love where we live, and as much as possible, try and interact with nature the way we have to.
Okay, we have had an early visit by Andrea. So how many named storms we're expecting this year, and how many of them are expected to be superstorms?
Okay, well, from the forecast, most of the entities I spoke about, the University of Colorado, the Weather Channel, and NOAA, most of them go for the possibility of 3 major storms. Over the last 4 years or so, we have had storms before the hurricane season, and as you mentioned, and that is one of the things that people must understand. The hurricane season is a set period of time where the basic ingredients are readily available for the formation of storms. It doesn't mean it cannot happen out of that. So having a thinking that you cannot get a storm in May is absolutely incorrect. In fact, practically every month in the year in our region we have had storms on record. So that is something persons have to be very careful about. The other thing though is that there are other weather events out of the hurricane season that could have significant impacts on you. For example, you could have what we call a trough. A trough could give you rain for 4 or 5 days, and you could go through severe flooding. You could have another time, you could have a build-up of a cumulonimbus cloud in one area, very light winds, and it blow up. I wasn't here at the time. I think you had that experience when 2 persons lost their lives in St. Peter or something like that.
Right on this road.
While all other places the weather was okay. So you can get those kind of things. So the concentration is not just hurricane season, and the concentration is not just hurricane. You could get a tropical wave in the hurricane season, and tropical waves behave differently. We could have a tropical wave pass through our area and there's nothing of significance happen. You wouldn't even know a tropical wave passed unless you were listening to the weather report and the weather said the passage of a tropical wave. You could get another time where you have a tropical wave interacting, for example, with an upper level trough, and in 6 hours you could maybe get 5 inches of rainfall that would cause severe flooding and so on. So there are a number of different things that we have to look for, not just hurricanes and storms and so on. And as a result of that, that's why we say that if you live in a place like St. Martin, you have to know your weather conditions and you have to know what's happening. Sometimes we take those things for granted because, for example, this morning when you come in here, you weren't concerned about how you dress. Because no matter how you dress, you're not going to feel too hot or too cool, whatever the temperature is.
Yep.
If you live in the US, you're going to check the weather every morning because you know if you want to have a coat or not. It's the same thing for us. It's not about temperature, but it's about rainfall and those things that could cause inconveniences for us. So we must pay attention to those things.
We have a group of people that frequent this island. They contribute greatly to the economy, the yacht population. But we see there's a trend, or there has been a trend, I hope it will change after Irma, but most of these folks think they can ride out any storm in the lagoon on their boat. What's your advice on this one?
Well, the advice on this one, and as part of the, in terms of when we're dealing with storms and so on, I am part of the Emergency Operating Center, and the message always is to get those persons out of the boats. So even if the boats stay, but to get the persons out. And a lot of persons on the yachts, they have information. They have their sources where they can go and get information because they know the risk factor. Yes, you will get 1 or 2 of them that will always be stubborn, but generally they would know, and locally I know a big effort is always done to try and get those persons to get out of their boats or take their boats elsewhere.
Another thing too, we have what, what you want to call them, curiosity seekers or daredevils that like to drive in the hurricanes. I've seen years ago in '95 and so during Lewis, and a few of them now. I mean, the emergency services, sometimes they have to get out because some people don't follow instructions. But what is also from the EOC and from your experience, what's the best advice on that?
What we try and do is we try to give a window as to when persons should not move, and we always go to the extreme. So for example, if I think a system going to have high winds for 5.5 hours, I will say 6 hours, because most likely you could get a little band that might behave differently on the out. So persons now would after 5 hours would think that things are done and so on, they would want to go down. We always say you need to be in until the all clear is given. And I know that after the experiences of Irma, I know that if we get any severe hurricane again, the authorities will be a lot stricter in terms of curfews and those kind of things to keep people off the streets, because you really want your first responders out to assess the situation before what we call disaster tourists.
Yep.
You know, people like to go out and take pictures and see what's happening. And a lot of times you put in yourself at danger, because you may think that the system is over because the winds are down, and then you get one strong gust, and then you have a lot of loose material and so on. And with that one strong gust, a piece of zinc or anything like that could just fly and you could get yourself injured. So you have gone through the most intense part of it. There's no excitement and anything to rush out for. Make sure that you're safe and the all clear is given before you come out. And another question I've been asked a few times recently is, people say that this building or this glass is resistant to 150 miles per hour winds. And we have to understand the difference with a piece of material, for example, glass, resistance to 150 miles per hour wind, with wind actually hitting the glass. So you have air hitting the glass at 150 miles per hour. But it is a different kettle of fish if you have a projectile. So if you have a piece of wood in that wind hitting that glass. So these are the sort of things that we have to take into consideration when we making our decisions. When someone said that glass is 150 miles per hour resistant, is it resistant to a projectile moving at 150 miles per hour, or is it resistant to wind at 150 miles per hour? That's two different scenarios.
I have noticed, and I was warning people in my area where I live that the sun wasn't over when the eye came. But this eye lasted kind of long. Is that normal? It was about 45 minutes, I remember.
For St. Martin, the scenario is, if we can try and picture it, if we have a ball, and you take the diameter of a ball, and the diameter of a ball, the diameter of a circle, let's say it's 5 miles.
Yeah.
But if you go across another part of the circle, it wouldn't be, because you're not taking the diameter, right? So basically what happened in the St. Martin scenario with Irma is that we really got the diameter. So the eye, so that's why the eye took that time. In other words, it went right over St. Martin, and that's why it took that time. But then another time what you could find is that you could find yourself in a situation where you get a maximum sustained winds, but because the eye doesn't go over the island, you wouldn't even get that calm, but you'd get very strong winds because you could have been in the eye wall of the system.
Okay.
So a system can affect you directly, but you don't get the ideal path of the system where the eye wall go over you and you get the diameter of the eye. So the eye could vary in terms of time. And again, the eyes of systems are different in size.
Okay. Oh, well, we hope that we don't need to be calling you in this season for more information on the storm, if there would be one. But we know that if we need to, knowing from your past activities, that we'll be in good hands in terms of information. So I would like to thank you for coming on the show and sharing the information with the people. And of course, if you have any last words, please.
Yeah, let me again thank you for having me here. I also want to recognize my team. It's not a one-man show.
I understand that.
We have a staff of 13, and everybody has a part to play, and they have been doing that. A lot of support. One of our mottos here is to build local capacity. So we have quite a few locals on our staff, and we try to upgrade them and train them as much as possible. So I want to recognize very much the team of persons behind me doing the work, and we want to encourage persons also to, again, information is important. Where you get the information from is very important. We have a website which is www.meteosxm.com, meteosxm.com, and we're also on Facebook, www.facebook.com/sxmweather, or if you just type in Meteorological Department St. Martin on Facebook, you will get our Facebook information, and also on Twitter. We also have little bits and pieces. We have our forecast there when we expect heavy haze like we have had in the past couple of days. We put in bits there telling persons with allergies to take the necessary precautions and so on. We continue updating it and try and give the information out as much as possible. We also have kids from different schools coming from time to time with their career guidance, want to see what the Met Service is about, if they want to have a career in meteorology and so on. Suffice to say, a lot of times students look at meteorology and they look at listen to persons on radio, see people on TV, and they look at it as a social science, but it is actually a natural science. So for those listening, meteorology is more about physics and maths than geography. A lot of people say geography, but geography is just a descriptive early days of meteorology. But it's a natural science, and it's a lot of physics and maths. So if any kids interested in getting into meteorology, feel free to contact us at the Met Office. They can come in for a few days, see what we do, and get an understanding of what it is, because one of our drives is really to build local capacity.
Very well. Okay, so I'd like to thank you for coming in. It's been a pleasure. Radio listeners, TV viewers, we've come to the end of the morning show with Elton Jones. I do wish you a pleasant day further. Goodbye.